But it makes me so sad, honestly. Washington, D.C. was making me sad anyway. I'd been there several times in the last couple months. Before all this, before all this and COVID and everything, Washington D.C. was legitimately one of my favorite places to travel to in the world. Um, I loved it there. I like all the different things you can do. I like that it's a good walking city. I like that there's good food there. There's good they like I mean all the museums and stuff. I loved traveling to Washington D.C. And now it's like a ghost town. And it was like a ghost town before all this. And now it's basically being completely militarized. This is sad. And this should freak out anyone. This is not the way our government was designed to be these elite idiots who are sitting on the hill telling all the peons what to do. This is not the way it should be. That is the people's house. That is the people's house. We pay for all of this. And you can tell their attitude about the average American person is they want nothing to do with you. Nothing to do with you at all. But don't worry about that because, you know, it's just because you might think this is an Orwellian reality. USA Today confirms that, if you think this is all a little Orwellian, don't worry. It's just because you don't know the definition for the term Orwellian. We just watched last night in my house. We watched the movie 1984, which I've seen like a million times, and I've read the book a whole ton. And I have the audiobook, and it's all really good. But we watched the movie last night, and it was really apropos to wake up this morning and this be one of the first articles. You may be using the term Orwellian wrong. Here's what George Orwell was actually writing about. Let's see from USA Today what George Orwell was actually writing about. Chances are you've seen George Orwell's name thrown around a lot in the past week on social media, either by conservatives invoking his name with sincerity or by liberals poking fun at conservatives for its misuse. Misuse. Okay, USA Today. I see you, USA Today. On Friday, when Twitter permanently suspended President Donald Trump's account, his son, Donald Trump Jr., was quick to invoke George Orwell. We are living in Orwell's 1984, he tweeted. Free speech no longer exists in America. It died with big tech. And what's left is only there for a chosen few. When Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri lost his book deal with Simon & Schuster after Wednesday's Capitol Hill riot, and his widely perceived role in helping incite the... Oh, now we're saying Josh Hawley incited the riot, are we? Had Josh Hawley even spoken that day? Okay, USA Today. He had some words for what he called the woke mob at his would-be publisher. This cannot be more Orwellian, he tweeted in a statement. Cheeky Twitter users have been quick to criticize the invocation of Orwell from people who, like many of us, probably haven't dusted off a copy of 1984 since high school. No. I have dusted off 1984 since high school. I have read 1984 probably twice in the last year at least, and watched the movie and thought about it extensively. So no. My copy of 1984 does not have dust on it in any way, shape, or form. As we all remember, Orwell's 1984 is about an old man who gets banned from a bird-themed social media site after regularly encouraging violence, tweeted progressive think tank Crevell Institute. This is what they actually think. Oh my God. Do you find it at all funny that after admitting that they probably haven't dusted off a copy of 1984 since high school, those very people who haven't read the book recently are also the very best to define it? Okay. My son just described having to clean his room as positively Orwellian. That's actually funny. That is funny. That is a smart kid. 1984 rose to the top of Amazon's top-selling book list over the weekend. On Monday, it reached the #1 spot. Not too bad for a book published in 1949. Too bad few people citing the book's dystopian horrors in earnest seem to understand its uses. Now, you'll notice at this point, USA Today has not actually talked about the definition of it. We're like, what, 4 or 5 paragraphs into this? More. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're 8 paragraphs into this article. And they still haven't actually clarified what they believe is wrong in the usage, which tells you something. It tells you that they know that people are only going to read the headline They're only going to read this headline and then they're going to say, oh, silly conservatives and their misuse of terms. And they're not actually going to read the article. And USA Today knows this, which is why they have not defined yet what the term, how the term is being used and correct in the article. But let's see. It seems like we might be getting to it. The term Orwellian has been lazy shorthand for exercises of authority with which one disagrees. No, that's not how most people are using it. No. When a publisher drops your book because your brand has become toxic, it's Orwellian. When an internet platform enforces its terms of service and kicks you off, it's Orwellian. When a store has you removed from the premises for refusing to wear a mask during a pandemic, it's Orwellian. No, that's not actually how we're using the term USA Today, but thank you for trying. It tends to be a catch-all for repression, says David, associate professor of English at USC and former book editor of the Los Angeles Times. He has read and studied Orwell's works extensively and finds Hawley and Trump's Orwell name-checking not just inaccurate, but ironic. Well, I wonder how David voted. That's a real irony in the fact that someone who paid such attention to clarity in language, Orwell's whole thing was about transparency in language, and language needed to be absolutely clear, like a pane of glass that a writer likes that becomes a rhetorical tool for people. Wait. I think this sentence is really not properly written. Hang on. Which is ironic given it's a sentence that is about clarity, but let me just try this again. Orwell's whole thing was about transparency in language. That language needed to be absolutely clear like a pane of glass. That a writer like that becomes a rhetorical. Yeah, this is a really poorly worded sentence. That's just what it is. That a writer like that becomes a rhetorical tool for people who would have been at a point of his lance. I don't even know what that means. It's actually almost counter-Orwellian, says a practicing psychotherapist with a master's degree in creative writing, whose critical thesis was on Orwell and how. Why are you a psychotherapist if your creative writing thesis was on Orwell? Dude, a practicing psychotherapist with a master's degree in creative writing whose critical thesis was on Orwell. Is that a psychotherapist that you would want to see? Someone who wrote their creative writing thesis on. Okay, I digress. That's ridiculous, though. In fact, Donald Trump's. Oh! Here's what they're going to do. They're going to say, no. Conservatives are the ones that are actually being authoritarian. In fact, Donald Trump Jr.'s tweet is Orwellian because he is using language as a way to control people's opinions about something that's happening in his favor. That's propaganda. There it is. Orwellian is probably the most widely used adjective derived from a name of a writer. Kafkaesque might become close. Yet, so many are using it wrong. It helps first to understand who Orwell was and the deeply political motivations that fueled his writing. Orwell hated fascists so much that he went to war with them. Are they actually going to argue that George Orwell is Antifa? Is that actually what they're about to argue here? I think it is. I wasn't even going to read this whole article, but now that they're about to argue that George Orwell is Antifa, I feel like we need to persevere. I feel like we need to get through this together. Every line of serious work that I have written since 1936 has been written directly or indirectly against totalitarianism and for democratic socialism, as I understand it, Orwell wrote in his 1946 essay handily titled, Why I Write. Yes, George Orwell would be on the side of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That's what this article is saying. That was the year Orwell joined a leftist militia to fight in the Spanish Civil War against fascist Francisco Franco's military uprising in Spain. Author Eric Arthur Blair, Orwell was his pen name, was... Okay, I'm sorry, guys. I don't want to read all of this. This is ridiculous. I don't think they're actually going to make any coherent arguments. Okay, hang on. Let's read this section right here. So what's 1984 actually about, and what makes a thing Orwellian? Newspeak, doublethink, thought crime, Big Brother. 1984 is reduced to its base components, the catchphrases and slogans of a fictional government in Orwell's dystopian allegory for Soviet totalitarianism. The takeaway is often oppression bad, liberty good. But Orwell's book is much more sophisticated. Oh, so the takeaway of oppression bad, liberty good is not good enough. What they're saying, like, no. Orwell wasn't saying liberty was good. Come on, you silly conservatives. That's not what he was saying. But Orwell's book is much more sophisticated. Orwell was interested not just in communicating the badness of totalitarian regimes, but also dissecting how they succeed through the manipulation of language. He was really most concerned with language and how language was used in a propaganda type of way or as a means of control. Orwell observed that totalitarian governments, whatever their ideologies, cannot simply impose their wills, they must indoctrinate. Their success requires complicity. He's really sharp on the ways in which people get indoctrinated. How much you want to bet that before this article is over, and I haven't read this, how much you want to bet that before this article is over, they're going to talk about Trump indoctrinating his supporters? How much you want to bet? Who wants to bet that's going to happen? Type Y into the chat if you bet that's going to happen, and I will have a drink. It's the mimosa's fault. All right, let's see. Okay. Which brings us to the term Orwellian. If Holly's book deal getting canceled and Trump getting booted from Twitter isn't Orwellian, what is? Orwellian in the most orthodox way is about language as a means of control. A Nazi propagandist, says Lenny, I'm not pronouncing that name. That would be very Orwellian because that's somebody using words to invoke feelings, to invoke allegiances, to discredit enemies. Orwellian is not just applicable to the fascists and communists of Orwell's era. This guy believes 1984 is relevant to our political moment. Oh, here it comes! Here it comes, guys! Here it comes! There are aspects of the novel that are quite reminiscent, interestingly enough, of Trumpism. Who could have seen that coming 3 miles away? Even though Trump's right wing, things like the dissemination of false information, the use of information to obfuscate rather than illuminate. He also sees shades of 1984 in social media. In the book, Orwell invents 2 minutes hate, a daily activity in which video of the enemy is publicly screened, and the audience is encouraged to... They're saying that that's cute? Dude. Okay, let me finish this paragraph, and I'm going to go on a little rant, okay? The 2-minute hate, that kinds of reminds me of what we're seeing in terms of social media mob mentality and this extreme conspiracy theory working on people's most negative, virulent emotions and using that as a way to control them, but also to make them feel as though they are being heard. Dude, listen, Q people may be crazy. They may live in an alternate reality. But they're not doing 2 minutes of hate every day. That's what the left is doing. That's what the media and CNN and MSNBC and everyone on the left does to the left every single day is it stirs them up in a mob of outrage. People on the right are so much happier than people on the left because people on the left are addicted to outrage. To say that they're doing 2-minute hate on the right, that's absurd. That is one of the most absurd things I've ever heard. Then they have some other stuff you should read by Orwell, and that's basically it.